Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Jeremy Smith. Such is tradition that on Easter Sunday he should arise, and cometh the hour, cometh the new king of Paris, as PSG celebrated their title victory with an Mbappe hat-trick. But who else is rising from the dead, and who is still unable to run because they're full of chocolate? All of that and more after your latest headlines. Dijon added to what has been an ideal April for them with a 3-2 victory over Rennes on Friday night. Three separate goal scorers mean they close the gap on those currently in safety to just 4 points, while the Brittany club are putting all their eggs in the Coupe de France final basket next weekend. Lyon halted their recent slide with a relatively comfortable 2-1 win over Angers, with Martin Terrier scoring for the fourth match in a row. On Saturday, Marseille are continuing their push for European football as they beat strugglers Guingamp 3-1. Jocelyn Gourvenec's side remain at bottom and are now 4 points adrift from the relegation playoff place currently occupied by Dijon. In the multiplex, Caen kept pace with Dijon as they ran out surprise 1-0 winners at Nice, while Montpellier kept their hopes on Europe alive with a 3-1 win at Strasbourg. Nîmes have won 3 of their last 4 games as they beat Bordeaux 2-1, while on Sunday, Nantes have now won 3 in a row as their 3-2 victory leaves Amiens looking nervously over their shoulders. Lille allowed PSG to avoid choking again as they only managed a goalless draw at Toulouse, sealing their title, which also could leave the door slightly ajar for Lyon next week, while Saint-Etienne kept the heat on their rivals for that Champions League place as they dispatched Reims 2-0. In the final match of the weekend, Kylian Mbappe hit a hat-trick against former club Monaco in PSG's title celebration. The 3-1 victory mattered less to the champions than it did to the Principality side, who are not quite certain on Ligue and safety just yet. And that's all for now. But to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week where else but Paris Saint-Germain confirming their 8th Ligue 1 title before kicking off against Monaco because of Lille's draw with Toulouse. We've been holding off for this topic because of the recent losses, for not just the last Monday show, but also probably for the last preview show as well, Jez. But they're finally over the line, and you could half see the pressure sort of come off them when they played the game against Monaco, albeit them being a sort of favoured opponent for them. But taking away sort of those last couple of weeks as well, where they've sort of really took their foot off the gas, it has been another strong campaign from Paris Saint-Germain, where in a lot of the games in the first half of the season especially, they showed just how good they can be.
Yeah, I think I got a tweet from someone who's a sort of occasional follower of Ligue 1 at some point this week, and he said surely Tuchel must go now after having such a bad season. And I strongly disagree with that. I know that they came up short again in the Champions League, and obviously a little bit short in the Coupe de la Ligue, which is very much the sort of fourth priority for them when they start the season. But overall, although it's the last 3 weeks or so have slowed it down a little bit, I think it's been an excellent season. As a sort of first season for Tuchel, I think at times they've played some fantastic stuff. I think it's an ongoing debate, but he's blooded a few youngsters. He's shown tactical flexibility. He's done for a lot of the season the kind of thing that we're sort of always torn with about PSG. Kind of on one side, we want it to be more of a competition, and then on the other side, we're sort of get annoyed where they don't really sort of show everything that they can do, considering the riches they've got on offer. For a lot of this season, I think they really have blown other teams away, and that is really what they should be doing week in, week out. What sometimes you criticise them for not doing. Overall, I think it's been probably their strongest season in terms of the football they played, and I guess on the European stage, it kind of bodes well if they can sort of build on what they've done this year and certainly learn the lessons from what's gone wrong this year.
Yeah, because I think if we set our minds back, we kind of because of what's happened just in the Champions League and the last couple of weeks in Ligue 1, as well as the when you just expect them to get over the line, but they couldn't quite finish off the deed, which sort of has tainted it slightly at least. But we forget that Paris Saint-Germain have been first since week 2. They were second in week 1, so they've been on top of Liga throughout. And then when you take into account that yes, they lost to Liverpool in the group stages of the Champions League, but that was their only loss in the 2018 side of this year, and they've only had they've only had 5 losses in 2019 so far, 3 in Liga, when it took till early February for someone to actually beat them in the league, and it's only the losses to Guingamp in the cup and against Manchester United in the Champions League, and the 2 that have recently preceded and have really been faults on their resume. And they've been excellent in some games, really. I mean, it was maybe a little bit of a knock in some stages, and I'm sure we'll come on to Neymar, that he was really in great form before he got injured, and that has affected them in somewhat. They've had a number of injuries recently. We've mentioned the list on Thursday of the amount of players they've had out or missing recently, where yes, Tuchel's having a little bit of a statement by not having a full complement on the bench, but at the same time, they are underhanded from what they would be at a full strength side. But at the same time, they've had some tremendous results. I mean, we forget back in October, they absolutely hammered Lyon 5-0. They were terrific on that one. They got a great 2-0 win away at the Velodrome against Marseille in that same month. That was an excellent result. They had some good results in Europe before that. Manchester, obviously the away leg against Manchester United, they were really great. Maybe could have got a couple more to really hammer home that advantage they'd gained. They got that great result against Paris Saint-Germain at home, which were desperately needed, even though the games against Napoli weren't particularly good. So there's a lot of platforms for them to pull off, really, and it's more just a case of in the summer getting some players to complement the excellence they have, because I suppose we forget just that they've missed a fair amount of time of Cavani recently, a fair amount of 2019 without Neymar. Verratti's been in and out through injuries, been more recently a lot fitter, but there's been no Marquinhos recently, who's been excellent throughout. There's been no Angel Di Maria, who's had a tremendous season again, possibly even his best one in a PSG shirt, I would argue. There's definitely bones of a side here that, adding 2-3 good players that we know that they have the means of doing at least, and they could really be pushing for Champions League, not just through to sort of the semi-finals at least, but they should be even potentially one of the favourites for the tournament should they get over the hangovers they've had recently.
Yeah, they've proven this year. It sounds a silly thing to say considering the way they went out, and no offence, but to an extent the team that they went out to. But I really think that in some ways they have made Champions League progress this year. They were in a very tough group. They started very badly with that defeat to Liverpool, but they really kicked on from there, finished top of that group, outplayed Liverpool in the end, Belgrade when the chips were down. And in that first match against Man United, looked excellent as well. So there are, and as I said, I think with the tactical flexibility that Tuchel's brought in, there are positive signs, and I still maintain that on their day they can beat anyone. It's just that the sort of recurring problem, which seems to be more kind of in players' heads than in their feet, and I still think some issues that have never gone away about squad depth, and certainly depth in certain positions within the squad. But if Tuchel can sort those things out, and it's very clear that he's aware of those issues, then I don't see why they can't make a push to go further in Champions League next season. They really should have done this year, as we've gone over several times before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more than any time you can say that team that they went out to in the Champions League after this weekend, especially. But I want to highlight a couple of players that I've really enjoyed, because I mean, we'll come on to the main man, quote unquote, really, because Mbappe has been terrific, and a number of the players we've already mentioned have been great. But number one, I want to mention Alphonse Areola. I think you'll agree, Jez, we've mentioned him a few times that he's been excellent this season. It's probably the best I've seen him at Paris Saint-Germain, probably even the best season I've seen him have since his loan move at Villarreal, in fact, when he was excellent in La Ligue. And we were saying that he really should stay in Paris, and thankfully he did. And admittedly, even though Trapp obviously went on loan to Frankfurt and he's had a really good season in the Bundesliga, it was nice to see him rebound. But you could expect any young goalkeeper to fold when not just the quality, but the experience and the real heavyweight that is in the dressing room as well. Buffon must be, because he's been a terrific goalkeeper for decades, really, in all honesty. And a lesser goalkeeper would have crumbled in it. And if anything, Areola rose to the challenge. He's been excellent in some games. The mistakes have been much fewer than in past years, and he earned that number one spot. Really, it's sometimes a shame that he was, for example, in the game against Manchester United, not playing, and obviously the Italian has made the mistakes that have caused the goals. But he has to be looked at as the number one next season, and for once, a position that we'd said that PSG needed to spend money on, and for once, it's not a position they need to worry about as much anymore, because he seems to have established himself as a number one and potentially a challenger for that French national jersey as well. And the second one I want to mention as well is Marquinhos, who's had a superb season, not just in defence but in midfield at times. He's been a great defensive midfielder, none better performance than that away leg at Manchester United. He's been easily their best defender, and it's just been a shame that because he's so good, he's probably been the only one who could move into the midfield that has cost them sometimes. So that's why a defensive midfielder is so important for PSG. It's not just because they're desperate for someone that's a more of a specialist in that role and can excel and help protect their defence, but it's also so Marquinhos can prove himself in the best role. And it's incredible to think that he's still so young. He's got so many years ahead of him at PSG. He's going to be a great leader for them next season. But I'll let you talk about the main man, Jez, because there's been a few tussles, shall we say, on Twitter that people disagreeing that with what even Jean-Pierre Papin's been saying now, and I don't think I would want to argue with him because he's the last man, Frenchman at least anyway, to score 30 goals in Ligue 1, and Kylian Mbappe follows him at just the tender age of 20. He's had a sensational season, and this is his team, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to mention or to sort of add to what you said about Areola and Marquinhos. I mean, to me, in many ways, they sort of epitomise the two issues that I think are the sort of, apart from the mental weakness and Thiago Silva and all that we've spoken about before, I think Areola and Marquinhos, in a way, sort of epitomise the two recurring problems that until they're sorted out, and for me, as I've said several times before, it goes to the top and it goes to Al Khelaïfi, and he's the first person I would ship out of PSG. They're the problems that need to be sorted before PSG are able to progress. Areola, I think, again, I love Buffon. I've loved him since I happened to watch his debut on TV when he was 17. I've loved him ever since. I mean, he's fantastic. I'm sure he's doing a lot for Areola in the background as well, helping him learn about the sort of rigors of first team top quality football. But for me, Areola is undoubtedly a better keeper right now than Buffon is. And okay, mistakes happen to all players, but the fact that Buffon was picked ahead of Areola in that Champions League match, and the fact that he made the huge mistake, which ultimately was the one that sort of helped PSG lose their nerve in that Man United match, says it all. And to me, you reap what you sow. I think that was a mistake that was coming, and as long as Al Khelaïfi or whoever it is that's sort of picking the team is kind of enthralled to the big names rather than picking the players who deserve to be there, I think that's going to be a recurring problem. Then, and Marquinhos, basically, as you said, the fact that he had to play in midfield, and in that first leg, he was absolutely fantastic in midfield. I, at the time, said it weakens the midfield. He proved me wrong on that, but it does weaken the defence because you're taking your best centre-back out of his strongest position. And, Tuchel has very clearly stated, subtly, unsubtly, however you want, that he needs more depth in midfield. and I think that's something that will be sorted out in the summer. To be honest, if it isn't sorted, I could see Tuchel walking, and then Marquinhos can sort of comfortably slot back into his centre back role, and all the better for the team. But yeah, there's been a bit of debate on Twitter the last few days, and I got a bit of abuse for saying it. Rich got a bit of abuse for saying it. Andy Scott got a lot of abuse for saying it. We all basically said, and it wasn't a huge step after last night in his excellent hat trick, that Mbappe is the main man at PSG right now. And I think, I mean, first of all, just to be absolutely clear, I'm not saying that Neymar is not a good player. I'm not saying that he doesn't add a lot to PSG. I'm not even saying he doesn't necessarily make Mbappe a better player. But to me, there's absolutely no doubt that if you had to pick one player to stay at the club right now, it has to be Mbappe. He scored, as you said, he scored 30 goals this season. There's a stat that I saw this morning. He hasn't even been a professional for 3 full seasons yet. And you look at what he's won already: World Cup, Euro, under 19 Euros, 3 league titles in his 3 years as a pro in two different clubs, a couple of Coupe de France, probably another one to follow, a couple of Coupe de la Ligue, fantastic goal scoring record for club and country. And he's only 20. He's only, fitness permitting, he's only going to get better. He's been there all the way through the season, scoring, from more or less day one. There was that early moment earlier in that match against Nîmes quite early on, where he got sent off. He looked it looked like maybe there was going to be a bit of petulance creeping in, but he's toned that down. Okay, there's still a couple of sort of nascent diving issues, but generally he's been their talisman, whether he's asked to play on the right or the centre. There were some people unbelievably were questioning whether he could play down the centre. He's absolutely proved them wrong, and he's been there the whole time, scoring goals consistently. He's absolute box office. Neymar obviously is to an extent as well, but it seems crazy to say because Neymar's still in his 20s, but in a sense Mbappe is making him look old hat. And also Neymar, just for all the good that he does, and there are stats to show that that PSG's results are better with Neymar in the team. Let's address that. I mean, stats are stats. That's the thing that a lot of these fanboys that we're all getting abuse for fall back on. Remember also that in the 2 seasons that Neymar's been there and he's got injured the second half of the season, that's also been when they've taken their foot off the gas because they've lost the motivation of Champions League and they've pretty much won the title anyway. So to an extent, it's ridiculous to compare the stats. People look back, people talk about the Real Madrid matches last year. Oh, they lost because Neymar wasn't in them. He was in the first one. They still lost. This year, Man United, well, they outplayed Man United in the first match. You can't say that Neymar was going to change anything in the second match. To me, Mbappe is the future. He's the person the team can be built around. He's, straight after the match yesterday, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying." Neymar, there's been rumours linking him with Real Madrid the whole time he's been at PSG, and as far as I know, he's never outright said, "I'm extremely happy. I'm absolutely not going anywhere." He always gives very equivocal answers, which suggests that he would be open to offers. He's indulged more than anyone else, which to me suggests that. To me, it can't be good for, and it apparently isn't, for changing room atmosphere. He's part of this big Brazilian clique, which undermines a lot of the others, most especially Cavani. If we're going to look at stats, look at Di Maria's stats when Neymar's not there compared to when he is. Neymar might bring a lot to the team, but possibly the way he plays takes from other players. Di Maria is a completely different player and a fantastic one, and was man of the match, by the way, in that first Man United leg, without Neymar there. So it's easy to fall back on stats, but there's a lot more to it than that. And El Khelaïfi clearly is obsessed with the commercial side, and of course Neymar, when he came in, it was a massive commercial coup, and I'm sure they sold hundreds of thousands of shirts with Neymar on the back. But Mbappe wasn't the Mbappe that he is now. Then Mbappe, take away Ronaldo and Messi, and they're obviously both in their 30s now. Mbappe absolutely is the global star, and they have to build football-wise, commercial-wise, everything. He is the main man, and there's a lot of these Neymar fanboys. A lot of them seem to be very nouveau PSG fans. Probably never heard of, I don't know, Rai or Safet Susic or any of these ex PSG megastars. It's only sort of in the last 3-4 years that they've been interested. That they need to do a little bit more research, a bit more history. They need to look at a bit more of Ligue in total, not just PSG's matches. A lot of them fall back on the fact that, oh, well, Neymar's been injured at the end of the year, so we can't really, it's not fair to compare them. And again, as I said earlier, Champions League, Neymar, would have been so different if Neymar hadn't been injured. I'm sorry, but top level football, that's an issue as much as anything else. Mbappe, he was rested against Nantes, but effectively he's played non-stop the whole season, with having played a longer summer, remember, than Neymar as well. And he's barely let his levels drop the whole time. It's unfortunate that Neymar has got injured, but the fact is they invested 222 million euros on someone to win them the Champions League, and he hasn't been there when it's come to the sort of money time of the Champions League. It's not necessarily his fault, but to me that means that transfer was a failure because he hasn't been able to do exactly what they signed him to do. So again, just to be very, very clear, Neymar is an absolutely fantastic player. He'd be a plus for any team. He is a plus for PSG. But to say that he is still the main man there, I just think is extremely ignorant.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to cast your mind back 2 summers ago and whether Al Khalifi and PSG actually thought they would get both of them. It seems like when you sort of look back on it, they just lived with the fact that they got both of them for so easily. I think they must have thought that even if they paid the fee for Neymar, that he maybe would turn them down or go elsewhere. And then when they had got Neymar, maybe they felt that Monaco wouldn't give them Mbappe, and maybe that a Real Madrid would come in for him. But it matters that they got both of them now, and I have a bit of a not a soft spot, I would say, but I feel a little bit sorry for Neymar, but because ultimately he is a top 5 player. He is world class. He is going to go down in history books as an excellent footballer, but he'll always feel a little bit like the bridesmaid and not the bride, unfortunately, because he's been part of an excellent Barcelona team that was ruled by arguably the best player in the world that we've ever seen in Lionel Messi, and he's now part of a Paris Saint-Germain team that is arguably being run by someone we may see in a decade's time as one of the best forwards we've ever seen in Kylian Mbappe, who does sort of, Rio Ferdinand always mentions he reminds him of the Brazilian Ronaldo, and I can't think of a better comparison, really. He does really have that similar style, especially now he's playing through the centre. And yeah, I think you're right, Jez. I can't imagine a world where any manager, if a team came in and gave you 200 million for Neymar and the opportunity to bring 3-4 players in potentially to build out the squad a little bit more and give some players different responsibilities, maybe even change the formation. I know Tuchel might like the 3-5-2, and the imagination of Cavani and Mbappe through the middle would be really exciting, really, for Paris Saint-Germain. But I suppose we may never even know if something like that happens, because is there another team that can even afford that? And is it more sort of building maybe with Neymar and Mbappe together, which is another frightening thought at the same time. But I suppose it's a good problem to have at the same time. But I just quickly, at least on their opponents, because there was a match going on Sunday night. If you didn't realise, Mbappe got an excellent hat trick against his former side, and Monaco have been a bit iffy over the last couple of weeks. They've only won one of their last 7 games. They've lost against Cologne a couple of weeks ago, just at the end of March. They drew against Guingamp, they drew against Reims, they got a pretty lucky win against Lille before drawing the games beforehand. They're not completely safe at the moment, Jez, especially with the Dijon game that we'll come on to. But this reminds me a little bit of a similar situation we're seeing in England with Manchester United, where they've had a bit of a bounce with the manager coming back in. He's got the positivity and the results started flowing, but maybe the pressure started to come off a little bit. Maybe the players' concentration has gone, and it's showing that there's almost certainly now, and we kind of knew this anyway, but it's a reminder to Monaco fans and Ligue 1 fans that the issues there at the Principality Club run much deeper than just the managerial position.
Yeah, I just want to very quickly add two more things about Neymar. Sorry, but I should have said before. But I think that his signing at the time, especially for that amount, served a big purpose. It was really a big statement for PSG to say, you know, Barcelona, Real Madrid, we're right up there with you. We're coming for you. And it clearly did spook them for better or worse. But again, it has to be backed up with the results on the pitch. And so it's almost not, it's backfired to an extent in the sense that it's really turned a lot of Europe against them, but it's also made them look a little bit silly in that they've said we're coming for you, but haven't come close to the Champions League since. And the other thing is, I think Neymar's probably peaked. Mbappe is only going to get better. And just think of the number of players, especially central midfielders, for example, the PSG could have bought with that 220 million. Tuchel's been making so much fuss recently and making the point of only naming 5 substitutes to say that he's got such a thin squad. He's got a thin squad because they've hamstrung themselves by spending 220 and restricting themselves FFP wise. And if I don't think they would weaken themselves that much by selling Neymar, because I think they could balance it out with the players they could bring in. If they were to sell Mbappe, I think it would weaken the team and it would send out a negative message. I don't think selling Neymar would necessarily. Okay, rant over. Monaco, I just don't know where the team's at. I think it's just a write-off of a season for them. And there was obviously that period when Jardim came back and a few of the injured players and the more senior players came back and they had that little run. Even then, they didn't sort of win many of them, but they made themselves harder to beat again. And yeah, they're slipping back closer to the relegation zone. But I think I can't see them falling right back into it. I think they've done enough, and they're just going to have to rethink everything and rebuild in the summer. But the only thing that concerns me is I'm still not convinced that Jardim coming back is the right thing to do. Obviously, they can get rid of players like Glick, who seem a little bit past it, Subasic, who I just think is frazzled after last season and the World Cup and fitness issues. Falcao, possibly, who I think has turned out to be a fantastic professional for them, but is also maybe looking a little bit sort of one season too many. And I do think they've got some good young players there to build from anyway, like the likes of Badiashile, who I really think has been a find this season, for example. But he scored this weekend, but I think Golovin, for the most part, has been a complete flop. For me, it still remains to be seen whether Martins isn't going to prove to be a flash in the pan. But Jardim, I just worry that they often say never go back, and I think possibly for him it's not such a bad situation because he's come in with so much power. But I wonder if he's in their desperation for him to come back and sort things out. Maybe they gave him a little bit too much power, and sort of worry for them that that's going to come back to bite them and maybe him as well over the next few months, when there will start to be kind of tensions between him and some of the people in the background. There's been a kind of big turnover of decision makers before players, and so this summer is going to be very interesting when these new people sort of behind the scenes are going to want to prove themselves and impose their authority and their preferences for the style of play and the style of player. And then Jardim will come in with his views. As long as they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, it will be fine. But if not, then whose decision wins out? Who's really in charge there? And I think that could be a problem, irrespective of what happens this season. I think they'll get lucky ultimately that there's at least 3 teams who are worse than them. But big mistakes were made in the summer, and I think it could be that with hindsight, possibly mistakes would have been made in January that we may or may not know about yet. And the fact that things settled down a little bit, but clearly aren't great there, don't think it bodes that well for the future.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they decide to possibly blow things up in the summer to decide on who's worth keeping and who's worth moving on, really, because they have sort of stagnated this season, certainly. And on to a team that's going to worry them a little bit, at least, and have them looking over their shoulders, and that's Dijon, who pulled out another excellent result that we didn't quite see coming, at least anyway, in their 3-2 win over Rennes that pretty much puts an end to their European hopes unless they can get a win in that cup match coming next weekend that we'll have a look forward to on Thursday. But concentrating on this relegation fight, really, because Dijon, with that win, it was an excellent victory for them. They showed again the spirit that they've shown in the last couple of weeks, Jez, that they're absolutely fighting and scrapping for their lives. The win against Lyon was totally out of the blue. They got a good draw against Amiens, despite the obvious off-field troubles that happened in that game. But an excellent result against Rennes that sets them up for the game against Caen next week, which would really put some breathing space between them and the bottom two, should they get a result, given how Guingamp fared at the weekend, which we'll come on to. But an unbelievable result for them, where we thought they were dead and buried a few weeks ago, and now they're only 4 points off Amiens themselves, and they've got them and Monaco looking behind their shoulders. It's a real turn of events in the last couple of weeks for them.
Yeah, we discussed that they sort of could have got lucky in the sense that they played Lyon at the perfect time when things were completely in disarray there, and they even got lucky during the match with a couple of own goals as well. Then Amiens, I don't think was a great result. I think they could and should have done more. But then it was also a great time to play Rennes, who clearly, you look at their recent results, similar to Strasbourg in the lead up to the Coupe de la Ligue final. Rennes clearly have their minds on the Coupe de France final. And I think maybe a winless in 8, something like that, or 1 win in 8. So it was a good time to play then. But even so, it wasn't just the result, it was the manner of the victory as well. The fact that they were pegged back twice, but still came back and got that win. A couple of the goals were really fantastic goals as well. Brilliant volley by Jeannot, and then the last goal as well from Saïd to sort of show that composure later on, to sort of feint and take a defender out of the game, and then sort of slide it into the opposite corner for the win against his old club, just to rub it in a little bit. I think that's what bodes well for them. It's not just the win, but they showed some character, which they've been, I think, lacking for a lot of this season. And that 2-point cushion they've got now over Caen 19th, it means that they're, for that match next week, they're really in the driving seat. They would probably take a draw now, but suddenly they're morale-wise, they should be way ahead of the other two. They're playing good football. As I said, the character they're showing, I think, is the real plus. And I think they have been sort of, not to take any credit away from them, but I just think those last 3 games have fallen perfectly for them, very, really good timing-wise. But it's up to them to take advantage of that. And 7 points from 9 after the horrific run that they've been on beforehand. You have to give credit to Comboiré and to everyone at the club, and really good opportunity for them to secure probably still the playoff spot, but there's no reason now why they can't look to sort of climb a little bit higher.
Yeah, they've got to be making people nervous now. That's the important thing, I think, at this time of the season, because for example, Monaco, like we've mentioned, have played a lot of games that you would see as the sort of easier affair. They've played Guingamp, they've played Monaco recently. That's sort of put them on the back foot. They'll be pretty happy they've got a Rennes game sort of next week after the cup final, that sort of A, give them a rest, and B, give them either a heartbroken or jubilant Rennes side that gives them a real chance. But Saint-Etienne, Nîmes, then a really important game against Amiens with 2 games left, and then at home to Nice that could be anything at the moment, as we'll come on to the result that they gave. And then you look at Amiens' games coming up as well. They've got Strasbourg, which is winnable at the moment, although they've had some great results themselves after the cup final. Montpellier, who will be still chasing Europe. Toulouse, that can be any club that turns up really, and then gang up on the final game of the season as well. Depending on where they are, that could be a tricky one as well. So there's daylight in there. I mean, especially with these next games coming up. I mean, the game against Caen at the weekend is going to be absolutely massive for both clubs, but especially for Dijon, because if it gives them some breathing space between them and the relegation fight, not only that, it allows them to catch up a little bit, and then they've got Nantes, who are on a great run, but certainly a game you can get points out of, and a game against Strasbourg as well, against Paris Saint-Germain, who we've mentioned have got injuries and also have taken their foot off the gas anyway, and then a home game against Toulouse to finish the season. They've got a real chance of not just staying in, clearing themselves from the relegation zone, but even having a fighting chance at chasing them. Some of these sides, they'll be kicking themselves that they couldn't get the 3 points against Amiens. That would have really put the cat amongst the pigeons. But this result, they were really excellent, I thought, against Rennes. I mean, any side down there that goes ahead and gets cut back, then they put themselves ahead. It was a wonderful goal by Benjamin Janot for the second, and by Niang scores that absolute crazy goal with a chest and the sort of semi-overhead kick as well to make it level again, and to keep fighting, to keep finding a way. And Wesley Said to have absolutely wonderful composure to have that final goal as well. It was a real excellent finish from the former Rennes man as well, who declined to sort of celebrate when he did score, and fair play with him being trained at the club and everything. But a terrific result for Quambara, who's clearly getting a battling spirit out of them. But they'll be a little bit annoyed, at least, Jez, and they'll have every right to be, that the pesky Caen can't seem to stay themselves down, where they were, in all honesty, sort of it's very similar to the result against Monaco. Really, they weren't particularly dangerous. They didn't have a crazy amount of shots. They only had 7 shots in the game, 2 on target, and they get the one that goes in against GQ. They had a penalty against them that was saved. They had a 3-on-2 chance as well that Alan Saint-Maximin decides to delay on and ends up missing wildly. And you could see the anger from Pierre Lesmelou during that chance. But Nice really peppered them at times. I know they had 18 shots and 8 shots on target. They really should have got something out of the game. But Caen, yet again, as much as I like to say, I know it doesn't sound too flattering, but it should be, because they are the cockroach of Ligue 1. They just will not die, will they?
No. I mean, if they get out of this, I'm sort of only half jokingly saying that Brice Samba should be Ligue 1 Player of the Year, because certainly these 2 recent wins against Monaco and against Nice, he's just been absolutely immense. And the penalty save, which could easily have changed the complexion of the match. It would have been, it would have put Nice in the position of needing to hang on to their 10th 1-0 win of the season. So something they're clearly experts at doing. Had that gone in, I think Caen would have really struggled to get back into the match. And it wasn't one of those good fight for the goalkeeper kind of saves. It was a fantastic penalty save. And then he backed it up with 2 or 3 more world-class saves. And again, I mean, I think they showed slightly more than they did against Monaco. But again, Caen weren't that great. But if you've got a keeper that it's he's in a mood that it's impossible to beat him, then you only need to score 1 and you'll be fine. And I struggle to explain it, because, as you said, that they're not a good team. They're in a little bit of disarray. Bovu has been sort of chucked out of the squad this week for bad behaviour. They've got, if you watch the clips of any of their matches, the cameraman sort of, one time he goes to the bench, he shows a close-up of Mercadal. The next time it's Courbis. It's still not even clear who's in charge there. They shouldn't be. I mean, they're not in a good position. They're second from bottom, but they really should be dead and buried. And I'm not sure how they're still in there. It's with a fighting chance. But yeah, I mean, if I had to give one reason, it would be Brice Samba. And if they can get a win, they are at home against Dijon next week, then anything's possible. And obviously that they'll suddenly be in the better position. But again, although I said it against Monaco, although I said it against Nice, I don't think Caen shouldn't be good enough to win that match. But each time I say it with less confidence because of what they seem to keep being able to do.
Yeah, they are real pesky ones, aren't they, at the moment, really? Because you think that the result against, if they get a result against Dijon, if they get that 3 points, which would be enormous for them, they'll go above the mustard side, and then they face Guingamp, who'll be root to the bottom, and depending on their result, will be could be even a fair distance away from the Normandy side. They get 3 points there, and then all of a sudden they're right out of things, and that's what we always said, that it could come down to this double header for them. And the fact is that result was absolutely massive as well, because if they're 3 points worse off, if they, like you said, that penalty's converted and they lose 1-0, as Nice have a habit of doing to teams this season, then they're not just 2 points off Dijon, they're 5, and then they have to win that game, not just to catch up to Dijon, but to give them half a chance. Because if it was a game where Dijon won and went 8 points clear, they're dead and buried. There's no way that they can catch with those 4 games remaining and 12 points and an 8-point gap to Dijon. Even if they beat Guingamp, they haven't got Reims, Lyon and Bordeaux to finish the season. I can't see them getting the points they'd need from that. It'd be almost impossible. So just as we've mentioned before, Caen aren't pretty. They're not going to wow you with their style. They're not even going to put on an excellent performance, really. They're going to put on a pretty average performance most of the time, but they always know when to win. It's maybe the best explanation for Caen, not just this season, but possibly within the last 3 seasons. They just know when, not how to win, but when to win. They win at the times when you just think they're out of it, when you just think there's no chance of them doing something, and they just nick a little bit of points, even when someone else is getting a positive result. They just take something, and it's just a shame that the hope will be for Guingamp, because a disappointing result for them, really, a 3-1 defeat to Marseille after a couple of weeks of positive games, at least anyway. They were really unlucky against Monaco. They maybe felt they should have got more out of the Strasbourg game as well, especially after scoring 3 goals. Conceding 3 is really disappointing. So it was to and fro at times against Marseille. When it was 2-1, they had a chance to go 2-2, and they were unlucky. Marcus Thuram hit the bar, and it looked like it almost crossed the line, but goal line technology showed that it was almost millimeters, really, from actually counting as a goal. So the scoreline is maybe a little bit harsher on them than the actual result of the game from watching it. But it feels like it was a bit of a body blow for them, because, like we said, they're now 4 points off Dijon, they're 2 points off Caen, so their task gets even harder now, just because of how well the teams above them did. But at the same time, they've got Nice this weekend, and they seem to sometimes give out a freebie. So at the same time, we could be speaking next weekend with Dijon and Caen having only gained a point against each other, and Guingamp winning 3, and the race being all on again.
That would obviously be the ideal, that neither Dijon nor Caen get away, and certainly next week's match, Guingamp against Caen, they have to get 3 points there. But and as you said, it is possible to get something from Nice, but I feel like this week might have been a turning point. They have been really unlucky the last couple of weeks. Didn't quite hold on last week. You could say it's partly their fault for sort of dropping further and further back against Monaco, but just to be pegged back like that must be such a sort of punch in the guts. And then this week, obviously it's not all down to luck, but as far as I'm concerned, Dijon have got lucky with those last 3 fixtures. Certainly the two. The 2 either side of Amiens against Lyon and Rennes. Caen, again, it's not luck, but just Samba being able to sort of cover where other players have mainly fallen short. And then on the other side, Guingamp, who are kind of conceding last-minute goals, and then, as you alluded to, they're 2-1 up. Now the shot that comes down off the bar, it was literally about 98% probably, if the ball was over the line, that would have made it 2-2. Even if it had stayed that way, it really keeps them in touch. 3 points of goal difference isn't great, but in theory, 1 result away from Dijon. Instead, Marseille go up the other end and seal the win. And those kinds of things must be such body blows to Guingamp that it's in the same way that I said that the character that Dijon showed, I think is sort of, in a way, it's more than the 3 points, because it really gives them something to build on, some morale to build on. Guingamp must be thinking, what else do we need to do? And I feel like maybe this is the week where their fate's kind of sealed.
Yeah, it's. I was trying to give the optimistic spin on it, wasn't I, more than anything? But it just feels like because of the importance of the Dijon-Caen game, someone is going to get 3 points out of that game, and if they do, and Guingamp don't get 3 points against Nice, which although Caen got it, it's not always the easiest thing to guarantee with the sort of flip flop nature of Nice this season. But Guingamp will be really disappointed they couldn't at least nick something from that Marseille game, because they did have a little bit of chances. They weren't completely out of the match, but if they lose next weekend and someone gets the 3 points, you can kind of write Guingamp's obituary in Ligue 1, really, because I can't see them picking up the points. Even if they get that victory over Caen, it's starting to get a little bit of a sort of desperation times for them. But let's hope that we can still have an entertaining time, because my God, if there is a draw and they win, it's going to be a right good end to the season at the bottom of the table. It's been interesting already, but that last month was going to be, it could be absolutely crazy. On to a quick look at...
Guingamp do have other winnable matches coming to the end of the season as well. Home to Nîmes, never know which Nîmes is going to turn up. The same Amiens last match of the season. If Amiens are safe by then they sort of mentally be on holiday already. So it's not absolutely done for, but I just feel like this week maybe made it that one step too far.
Yeah, and that's always the difficult thing about looking at this stage of the season, at least anyway, looking too far ahead, because I mean that last game of the season, or even the last two games out of the season, might be even academic by that point, unfortunately, when you're having to chase points, at least anyway. But we should hope and wait and see, and fingers crossed that it stays as exciting as it has been for the last couple of weeks, because it's been one of the best relegation fights I've seen in a long while, even though it's only 3 teams involved in it. Very quickly on to European matters, really, because Lyon helped themselves back out again with a 2-1 victory against Angers on Friday night, where a player I particularly wanted to highlight, Jez, I'll give you some time on this one, because we've mentioned a lot of Lyon's struggles in the last couple of weeks, and obviously they're going to Genesio leaving in the summer and backbiting here, there, and everywhere. But within the cloud of that has been Martin Terrier, who scored 4 goals in 4 games. He's been a sort of stalwart in the last few games, at least anyway, for Genesio and starting. And he's really showed the quality and the reason why he's at Lyon, and why he was at Lille previously, obviously on loan at Strasbourg last season. But he out of all the forwards they have has been by far the best one over the last month or so.
Yeah, a lot of the problems at Lyon seem to be down to attitude and certain players who sort of pick and choose their matches, or maybe take being dropped or substituted very badly and go into a sulk that could last a couple of matches, or are looking for moves away, or not happy with where they're being played, all that kind of thing. And Terrier, obviously he's young, he's got time on his side, he's there to learn as much as anything else. But generally the whole season, where possibly at other times in the season he could lay claim to deserving a little bit more game time, even if he's not in the squad or he's just named on the bench, he's generally kept his head down, kept quiet, worked hard, often made a difference when he's come on. And yeah, in recent weeks he's kind of been rewarded for that. And yeah, I think it's 5 and 5 games, and considering that's coincided with Lyon going through one of their ruts, it really has sort of kept them going, saved a couple of points for them, and he's looked fantastic. And the goal that he scored this weekend, that could really be a glimpse into the future. Aouar with a great pass to set Terrier away, a composed finish, and it certainly should give Lyon fans confidence that whoever leaves this summer, there are still some really high quality players left. Terrier, I think also for France under 21s, in the end they qualified quite comfortably for the summer's European Championships. But at the start of Ripoll's tenure as coach and the start of this qualifying campaign, they had 3 or 4 sort of very sketchy wins, which from memory were more often than not down to important either equalisers or winners from Terrier. So he really does seem to have the sort of big game temperament. He seems to have a sort of calm, mature head on his shoulders. And unlike maybe some others who feel like they deserve a place in the starting lineup just by virtue of their name and possibly get it because of that, Terrier has really had to earn his place and work his way into that first team, and he's done it fantastically, and he's taken that chance. And yes, it's really been great to see. And over the last month, there hasn't been too much for Lyon fans to be that uh, that happy about, but certainly his form has been one of the few highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Lyon fans might even be hoping that the likes of maybe Depay gets a move somewhere or something like that, because it gives Terrier an even easier way into the first team. And with Dembele's form and with an attacker on the other side, whoever it may be, they could be really still a great side next season. If they do lose 3-4 of the players, they've got a real chance of succeeding regardless, which is great to see really, when they've got players like him, it does seem like the consummate professional at the moment, in a time where everyone else seems to be getting a little bit heady, and onto the team that's chasing them really in Saint-Etienne. I think we can mention Marseille very briefly, but we talked about in that game. Good goal from Germain, but they're going to need a little bit of luck going their way to really challenge for that Champions League spot. But Saint-Etienne kept up pace with a 2-0 victory, 2 straight clean sheets, 4 wins in their last 5, with a draw against Amiens sandwiched in between there. But a good result against what can be a tricky side in Reims. And on evidence of that game, they had some trials and tribulations, and Reims had a couple of strong chances, you would say, to at least get a point out of that game at times. But Saint-Etienne were clinical and got the goals they needed. They got the strikes they needed, and they're still only 3 points behind Lyon, who have to go and face Lille this weekend, which will be a great game in itself, and even give them a chance to possibly even still catch Lewis if other results go their way. But Saint-Etienne still plodding along and still being about there, but they've got to continue this momentum for the rest of the season, haven't they? Otherwise, they've got to make sure now at this stage of the season, at the business end of the season, they capitalise on any further mistakes from Lyon, surely, haven't they?
Yeah, Lyon's, like you said, still got Lille. They've still got Marseille as well. So they'd be doing very well to get 6 points from those 2 matches. And Saint-Etienne just need to maintain their current form and make sure that they're in touch and ready to sort of capitalise on any slip ups. And going to Reims and winning 2-0, I think, is not to be sniffed at. It wasn't the most vintage of performances, but to keep the 2000 in Nice Reims team from not scoring at home, especially, I think is a really impressive performance, and it shows where they are now in terms of form. That's 5 matches unbeaten, 4 wins. They're really in a good place, and I think that Gasset in recent weeks, he's kind of getting the best out of Cabella again. Kasri's scoring again. Last week, when they needed a little bit of help, Debuchy pops up with a couple of goals. So it really is. I think Kolodziejczak scored recently as well. So it really is a sort of a team, not a team performance, but the whole team is putting in a shift at the moment, and it's almost a sort of the diametrical opposite of Lyon, where there just seems to be so much sort of rumour about falling outs and arguments and tension in the changing room. So certainly Saint-Etienne are on the upward curve, and you look at their run-in, that they're not easy matches. They're playing against decent teams Monaco can be decent, like Montpellier, Nice, who are kind of European rivals with them as well. But they're the kind of matches that if they want to aspire to that third place, they just need to show that they're worth it by getting results out of those matches. Those 2 matches in particular at home. So you'd expect the fans of the Geoffrey Guichard to be right behind them, and I can see them maintaining their form and having a really strong end to the season. And then the onus is entirely on Lyon to somehow pick up the points, and think they have to get at least 4 from those 2 big matches against Lille and Marseille. Otherwise, I think Saint-Etienne could pick them.
Yeah, there's no doubt in that. They're going to be hopefully snapping at their heels, and credit to Jean-Louis Gasset, who's had a terrific season and is lifting a squad that, in all honesty, above their means, a lot of these players. But at the same time, this with him in charge with Saint-Etienne's current squad, had a good striker, had a good another centre back or so with Perrin slowing down and Subotic not quite as he was at Dortmund, you'd say, and with all the injuries he's had. Obviously, I know they've got a few young centre backs that a lot of their fans are looking at just behind the scenes as an extra, but a couple of those and they could be really good even next season. Never mind this, and it's been a great season, and if they keep this ball rolling, it could be a really fantastic end to the season if they can capitalise on any Lyon mistakes. Let's go to our Ligue snapshots, and I'll start with yourself on this one, Jez. What's your Ligue snapshot this week?
It's a couple of things that we've already alluded to, but it just made me smile, which was Mbappe and Saïd's goals for PSG and Dijon. It's become such a big thing now, really sort of making a huge fuss about how you're not celebrating against your former team. I like that Mbappe, who hadn't scored for PSG against Monaco since he joined, the first goal he didn't celebrate at all. The second sort of allowed himself a smile, and then the third, the hat trick, he kind of went mad and completely didn't care anymore who he scored against. And then Saïd as well, who, as you mentioned, out of respect for Rennes, didn't celebrate, put his hands up to apologise, but had the most massive smile on his face. I found it amusing. I think it's always nice when the players don't celebrate, but it's sort of become a bit of a thing. It's almost like the poppy thing here. It's almost like I don't know. You get criticised if you do celebrate against your old club when all you're doing is your job and you're scoring for your current team and your current paymasters and employers. There really shouldn't be any reason why you shouldn't celebrate. But yeah, that just made me smile.
Yeah, I think it's a weird line to cross, isn't it? The fact that I think in celebrations terms, I don't mind if there's a little bit of a fist bump, and I don't think fans should be that annoyed if a player celebrates scoring against them. It's exactly what I would do, and thinking back to the Mbappe goals, Glick running through Honey, he made it look like what I sometimes maybe look at on a five-a-side against anyone under the age of 21. Really, just old and fat, unfortunately. My Ligue 1 snapshot, I've got two. I think the pretty obvious one from Paris, the Notre Dame images on their shirt and them selling the on the club shop with an extra motif on there to help raise funds, which is a great thing to raise for. But at the same time, as many people have mentioned, hopefully the amount that they've raised, they can also support some worthy causes in terms of unemployment and homelessness and famine across the world. Hopefully they can use that to some good cause, as well as repairing the Grand Church, obviously, as well, and to a more annoying one, at least anyway, in Ligue 1, and it's back to the Nice Dijon game. The Nice Caen game, and a comment from Patrick Vieira afterwards. I think a lot of people have seen about Alex Saint-Maximin saying that he has all the talent in the world, but he's not quite got the mental attitude, as you say, to take to the next level, the work ethic, and it's a bit of a damning indictment on Saint-Maximin, because he's had a decent season, but at the same time, you just feel like a player of his quality can just do that little bit more. And it was emphasised by the fact that there was that 3-on-2 where he had the ball and he was about 25 yards out. And instead of making that simple pass to Pierre Desmelou, who would have been easily in for a chance of a one-on-one, he instead tries to take a shot from distance, and you could see the frustration from his teammate. And yes, some people may argue that, yeah, he's still a young player, but these decisions are happening week in, week out. And I think you might silently hear Jez nodding at home when I say that to me, he feels a little bit like Theo Walcott. It feels like that stage in his development. He's a fantastic player. He's got great pace. He's probably a little bit more skillful than the former Arsenal man, but possibly not quite as strong a finisher as he was in his younger days. But the indecision, the poor decision making in the final third is just something he really, really needs to work on. And I'm sure Vieira will be drilling in that should he stay in. If he doesn't, which the club seems open to, because they know that offers will come in, should he move on, he needs to find that, because otherwise he's not going to reach the level that really his talent suggests that he can reach, at least anyway. That's all that we have for this evening. My thanks to Jez and all of you listening at home. Do join in for the preview show on Thursday, where we will preview the Coupe de France final, which we'll all look forward to at the weekend. And this show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.